Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to be with you this morning. A couple of years ago, I was thinking about what I could do for our world that is so out of balance. And then I realized that at the heart of this imbalance is the absence of the sacred feminine. And I had some things to say about that. And so I unexpectedly wrote a book, which I am happy to have the opportunity to share with you this morning. Images and stories that tell us about the sacred have a powerful, often unconscious impact that ripples through absolutely everything in our world. And for thousands of years, in most spiritual traditions, the sacred has been represented almost exclusively as male. The stories in the book invite us to remember that we are all inseparable from the sacred. It's who we are. It's our essential nature, it's our true nature. Different traditions speak of this in different words and languages. But we can begin to see how the sacred lives in each of us in very personal, human, and quite ordinary ways. And whatever our gender identity may be, each of us has our own unique balance of sacred feminine and sacred masculine energies. But we now live in a world in which the feminine aspect of the sacred is not equally seen, valued, or reflected. And we are all impacted by that imbalance. I sat in the church of my childhood for years and never consciously noticed that all the pronouns were masculine. In Protestant churches like the one I grew up in, Mary, who is the sacred feminine presence in the story of that tradition, only appears once a year at Christmas. But the absence of the sacred feminine has been internalized and forgotten by most of us. Its impact, however, is everywhere. We see it in the dishonoring of the earth. We see it in the dishonoring of women. We see it in the separation of earth and spirit, the split between body and mind, and in our separation from the natural world and from other human beings. When I read in the Unitarian living traditions the description of prophetic women, I immediately thought of Buddhist scholar Joanna Macy, who was truly a prophetic voice for our time and was an important teacher for me. In the book, I wrote about meeting Joanna in the early 1980s. When I met her, I had been reading the Tao of Physics, and I was amazed that physicists had discovered the truth known to mystics of all times, the truth that everything is intimately interconnected, and interdependent. Joanna brought to life our interconnectedness. On the 4th of July, she led us in a day of meditation, celebrating our interdependence. We celebrated Interdependence Day. Joanna reminded us that what connects us to all other beings on our small planet is so much more important, so much more essential than what appears to separate us. Our views, opinions, our life stories may seem to divide us, and yet we are all dependent on a very delicate balance of earth, air, fire, and water. And we are made of these same elemental energies. We're made of the same energies as the forests, the hills, the oceans, the stars, and the galaxies. Every one of us is part of the web of life. Joanna often told the story of a 12th century prophecy she learned about from her Tibetan teachers. This prophecy tells of a time very much like our own, when our world is in grave danger. And at this time, the Shambhala warriors, which means all of us, must cultivate wisdom and compassion. The warmth of compassion opens us to the suffering of our world and moves us into action. Wisdom reminds us of our connection with others who are also finding ways to act on behalf of our world, reminding us that it isn't up to us alone. The energies of wisdom and compassion are gifts to sustain us in our time. Joanna helped me see that however hopeless a situation may feel, I have a sacred responsibility to keep my heart open and to speak the truth. One of the first stories in the book tells of a pilgrimage I made with my daughter. We went to places where there are still traces of cultures in which the earth and the feminine were honored for thousands of years. The ancient goddess was honored in geographically distant and apparently unrelated cultures, in ancient caves in Crete, in circles of Neolithic standing stones in England, beside holy wells found under cathedrals in France. And at the heart of all these ancient lineages was the understanding that all life is sacred and intimately interconnected. You may detect a theme here. Archaeologist and prehistorian Maria Gimbutas, who was among the first to interpret the sacred iconography of the Neolithic, points to the essential meaning of the goddess with these words. The ancient goddess, in all her manifestations, was a symbol of the unity of life in nature. Her power was in water and stone, in tomb and cave. Animals, hills, trees, and flowers, and in the sacredness and mystery of all there is on earth. might have liked to live there. So we might be wondering what happened to those cultures and what happened to the ancient goddess. I want to share with you some of what I have learned about those cultures and about what happened. But before we go on a journey together through the Paleolithic and Neolithic rather quickly, let's follow children's guidance and just pause for a moment. Breathe. Relax. Come back to yourself. Thank you. So what can we know about those, those ancient cultures? Well, we know that our earliest ancestors, our earliest ancient ancestors, told the story of their world, not in words, but in sacred images and symbols. As early as 20,000 BC, the people of the Paleolithic painted images on the walls of caves in France. They painted reindeer, bison, aurochs, the wild animals of the hunt on which their lives depended. Nearby, a female figure found carved in limestone holds in her right hand a bison horn, crescent-shaped like the moon, and marked with 13 notches. Her left hand rests on her rounded belly. These images suggest to us that the people of the Paleolithic were aware of earthly and celestial cycles, of the waxing moon and the female womb. As the ice melted and the large animals moved north, agriculture was discovered. And the nomadic life of the Paleolithic gradually transformed into the farming settlements of the Neolithic. This was a culture in which the earth and the female body were recognized and honored as the source of life. On sculptures and pottery were found patterns symbolizing flowing waters and spirals representing the snake, ancient symbol of the life force. But the most significant discovery made in excavations of Neolithic culture is not what was found, but what was not found. Nowhere is there evidence of warfare. There are no fortifications, no imagery of war. These pre-patriarchal cultures were peaceful and non-hierarchical. Their focus was on sustaining and honoring life. In the art of Crete, sorry, I skipped a sentence. I'm moving a little bit too quickly through the Neolithic. On the island of Crete, a highly developed civilization flourished in what was the flowering of the Neolithic. In the art of Crete, we find a celebration of life and of the natural world, images of the joyful ritual of dance. The dove, the bee, poppies, and lilies appear on ornaments made of clay, stone, bronze, and gold. While women and the goddess played a central role, this appears to have been a remarkably egalitarian culture in which the women and the men worked together in partnership. Crete was one of the last known cultures in which the earth and the feminine were honored as sacred. And so what happened? In our last few minutes together, we're going to move through a part of history that is not often spoken about. So this is another good time to pause. The breath. The warriors began arriving around 4500 BC. They came from the north, bringing with them their sky gods and their hierarchical culture. They invaded and overwhelmed the peaceful cultures of old Europe, one after the other. The power to dominate and destroy gradually replaced the understanding of power as the capacity to nurture and protect life. The archaeological landscape changed. Art disappeared. Pottery was no longer painted. There were no more images of nature. As the goddess was diminished, the world lost its connection with the sacred. Trust in the cycles of life and death, and trust in the presence of the goddess in all aspects of life was lost. Women, who were those most closely identified with the ancient goddess, were gradually reduced to subservience, fulfilling the role of reproduction. The fall of Crete marked the end of the culture of old Europe. The unified world view of the ancient goddess was lost. The patriarchal warrior cultures demoted, absorbed, or destroyed the ancient goddess. In Greece, she became the wife of male deities. In the Bible, in cultures where the goddess still lived, she was demonized, as was the snake, the ancient symbol of the life force. Mary, as the only remaining sacred feminine presence, became widely loved and venerated. And then in the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, the imagery and presence of Mary was removed from Protestant churches. In the witch hunts of the 15th to 18th centuries, most of those who died were women who had learned the ways of the goddess from their mothers and grandmothers. The ancient goddess of old Europe went underground, living on in myths and fairy tales. The history of Western civilization that we are told in our high school and college textbooks is primarily a story of thousands of years of war and conquest, a legacy of a legacy of the loss of goddess culture, a legacy of warrior culture. Women are mostly left out of the story, as is the wisdom of the sacred feminine. Notice what you feel as you hear these words. And so we end this morning with this question. Where can we find the sacred feminine now? There are cultures all over the world where the sacred feminine is known and honored by many different names. White Buffalo Woman, Pele, Oshun, Tara, Mary. But what I want to add to this, what I want to suggest for us this morning is this. We can find the sacred feminine in ourselves and in each other, whatever our gender identity may be. And when we consciously recognize, name, and honor the sacred feminine energies and the sacred feminine wisdom that live in every one of us, we are helping to restore the balance of our precious world.